Get back, get back.
A little girl dies suddenly in a small Texas community. Her family fears she was murdered. They search for answers, but find only more suspicion. With no direct evidence and no witnesses coming forward, the family teams up with a detective and a prosecutor to unbury the truth behind the terrible loss of a child. In this episode, some names have been changed. The mysterious death of a 2-year-old girl devastates her family and baffles investigators, who begin to suspect murder. Fighting to uncover the truth is prosecutor Jerry Yenny.
It was incomprehensible to me. This was planned, executed murder, premeditated, of a little human being. As a prosecutor, I need to make sure that that individual is brought to justice and that they stand before a jury and face what they've done.
Alvin, Texas is a quiet oil and farming community of 20,000, located south of Houston near the Gulf of Mexico. At 9:20 a.m. on January 23, 1994, a call came into the Alvin Police Department's 911 center. The caller reported that a baby had stopped breathing.
Attention Alvin EMS, need medical and crew.
The dispatcher sent an emergency medical squad immediately. The rescue team knew that when responding to a child in trouble, time is especially important. A minute can mean the difference between life and death.
The baby's not breathing. Right here in the living room. Come on in.
They entered the house at 9:25 a.m.
What's wrong, sir? Sir, what's wrong?
The child's father, Shane Good, was reluctant to let her out of his arms.
Give me the baby. Let me see the baby. Let me have the baby.
Also responding to the emergency call was Senior Patrol Officer Terry Earl.
Walked in the house and immediately observed a man holding onto a child. I could see the top of the child's head and one foot protruding from the blanket that had a gray sock on it. The child did not appear to be moving, making any noises.
And that's why you're going to...
Shane laid his little girl down so the EMTs could check her vital signs.
That's it.
When the child was laid down, I could see that rigor mortis had already set in to the lower extremities of her body.
She's gone.
2-year-old Renee Good was dead.
Michelle.
Renee's half-sister Michelle, who had spent the night with her cousins on a sleepover, called her mother, Annette Campisi.
I received a phone call in the morning from Michelle telling me that Renee was not breathing and the paramedics were working on her. She said the paramedics said that she's gone. And I said, Michelle, I'm on my way. I'm coming right now. And hung up the phone and drove.
20 minutes later, Annette arrived. The investigating officer learned the baby's parents were divorced.
What happened to her? What's going on?
Renee was on a custody visit with her father, Shane.
My baby, give her to me.
The patrolman tried to calm the frantic mother and escorted her outside. As with all child deaths, a detective on call arrived at the scene.
My baby was fine. There was nothing wrong with her. She was fine.
The police officer told him the baby had died, but that EMS personnel could not readily determine a cause of death. the detective learned the residence belonged to Renee's grandfather. The girl was motionless when he awoke.
Yes.
The detective hoped the child's father, Shane Good, could give him some idea as to what had caused Renee's death.
Dad, can you take the girls? Yeah. Come on, girls.
Their grandfather took the girls out of the room.
Yeah.
The detective asked Good what happened that morning.
Came down here. She said something's wrong.
Good said that around 9 o'clock, his
Daddy,
daughter Kelly
Daddy,
woke him
wake
up.
Quick. It's Renee. She won't wake up. Come quick. Renee, wake up. Renee isn't breathing. She can't get home.
The baby was cold to the touch.
Call 911. Now! Call 911! Tell them she's not breathing! Does Renee have any medical
The detective asked when Good last saw Renee alive. The father said he picked Renee and Michelle up the night before at Annette's. He brought them to his father's house, where he also lived, for a sleepover.
And now, live from Burbank.
Renee and her sister Michelle were excited about sleeping over with Kelly, Shane's daughter by a previous marriage, and her cousin Sarah.
Hey, give me that back!
Good said the girls had a fun night together. Around midnight, he told them it was time to go to sleep.
Especially don't play. Put your sister in bed and turn off the TV.
Having a problem holding on to your money.
Okay, baby?
He stayed with the girls while they settled down, then went to bed at around 12:30. Good said Renee seemed fine when she went to sleep.
Okay, Mr. Good.
He didn't hear
Thanks,
anything
Rhino. This is
unusual all night
difficult for you.
and had no idea what could have
That'll do for
happened.
now. If you can think of anything else.
Renee Good's body was sent to the medical examiner's office. State law requires an autopsy whenever a child under 6 years old dies. It was difficult for the grieving family, but they hoped an examination would reveal the cause of death. Results of toxicology tests could take several weeks.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh
2 days after her death, Renee Good was buried.
He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me
The family asked Shane not to come to the burial because tensions between him and Annette were so strong. They were desperate to know how Renee had died and why. Not long after the burial, police received a preliminary medical report. It suggested Renee might have died of pneumonia. They gave the news to their family contact, Renee's grandmother, Sharon Couch.
I knew that she didn't die of pneumonia. And I said, how can it be pneumonia when she wasn't ill?
Something had caused Renee's death, and the family was determined to know what it was.
If the medical examiner's office didn't know, and if the police department didn't know, someone, somewhere, would have the answer, and I was going to find the answer.
Couch followed up with the Alvin police. She and the family believed foul play might be involved in Renee's death. She told the case detective that Shane and Annette were married in November 1987. It was a second marriage for both, and troubled from early on. Within a year, the couple separated. When he learned Annette was pregnant after the separation, Shane denied the baby was his.
Look, I want to have this child.
He wasn't going to have anything to do with the pregnancy or the child. Annette's response was that she was going to have the baby.
I think that's an interesting thing. This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
When Renee was born, Shane demanded a paternity test. It confirmed he was the father.
She looks like her mother did when she was little.
Renee's death devastated her family.
When I try to describe Renee to people, I just don't think there's really any words that are just adequate to describe her, because I just can't convey what type of child she was, because she was so animated. She never walked. She would skip, she would jump, she would hop, she would dance.
The family believed Shane Good had something to do with Renee's death. They insisted that the police keep investigating.
There was just going berserk.
The detective went to the district attorney's office. He explained the case and the family's suspicions to Assistant District Attorney Jerry Yenny.
The mother was convinced that the father had killed the child, and the father was acting in a way that just didn't seem quite right.
The prosecutor asked if there was any life insurance on Renee.
Yet on insurance policies, but I'll look further.
Investigators had not found any.
I don't know why I asked that, because normally when somebody kills a child, it's usually in a fit of rage, anger, and they didn't really mean to do that. We've never had a case where somebody would want to monetarily profit from a child's death. But I was looking for any conceivable explanation for a parent to want to kill a child.
I will check on the...
The prosecutor suggested Shane Good be brought in for a polygraph test.
Get back to me right away on that, okay? All right, thank you, Detective, very much.
When police called him, Good agreed to come in and take the test.
I talked to him a while ago, and he said he's on his way. So
Detectives were eager to see the results,
yeah,
but Good missed the appointment. Eventually, Good called to cancel, explaining that he was having car trouble.
Yeah, we're waiting for you. Where you at?
The detective rescheduled twice more. Each time, Good failed to show. 3 months after the mysterious death of her granddaughter, Sharon Couch received the final autopsy results, hoping they would answer the family's questions.
When we finally got a copy of the autopsy report, the medical examiner and the law enforcement agency, they were telling us, well, it was undetermined.
Renee's mother also read the report.
I was so angry and upset that I thought, I cannot believe they actually put undetermined on here.
Couch refused to accept the medical examiner's conclusion.
I just wanted the answer of why she died. All I was interested in, I contacted every doctor that wrote a report in any of the medical journals regarding some of the things that we'd found on the autopsy report.
The family also kept in contact with the police, asking them for updates. But the investigation grew cold. Then, several weeks later, the family received a phone call that started the case moving forward. They spoke with Stacy Andrews, who had lived with Shane Good after he and Annette divorced.
Way before, he would always just...
She felt that Shane had done something to Renee. And it was real important for her to get in touch with Annette, because I guess she wanted to talk about their experiences with Shane. And at that time, I don't think she was aware that we were thinking the same thing.
Andrews explained her suspicions.
Because of the child support.
She said Shane had a good relationship with Kelly, his older daughter by previous marriage, but avoided the subject of Renee. He always referred to her as Annette's child.
How's that?
According to Andrews, he never even wanted Annette to have the baby.
So did you find out anything about the paternity test?
When she asked Shane if he checked on the results of the paternity test, he became upset, getting angry at any mention of Renee.
Don't start with me.
One time when
She said he did not like having to pay child support and said he would demand visitation rights just to make Annette mad.
Did she never mention it?
Then, she said an insurance agent left a message on their answering machine.
I don't know.
Shane had taken out a secret life insurance policy on the little girl. Andrews considered this unusual, since Shane often complained about money problems. She called the agent to try to get more information.
Hi, I'd like to speak to somebody about some life insurance.
She pretended that she wanted life insurance on her kids and just took a chance and said, I want the same kind of policy that Shane has on his children. What kind was that?
The agent checked his records.
And Renee.
She did find out that Shane had taken out a life insurance policy on Renee, and it was for $50,000. You know, a child that he didn't even come for his visitation. We kind of thought that was, you know, pretty suspicious.
But it was perfectly legal. The family still felt they could do nothing. They were unaware that they had a new advocate in the Alvin Police Department. Detective Sue Dietrich had developed a personal interest in the investigation. She asked permission to work on the cold case.
It caught my attention because it was a child and that there were some suspicious circumstances. And I too had a child that died when he was 17 months old, and I had to agree to an autopsy, which was not something I wanted to do, but I did because I wanted to know why my child died.
An autopsy revealed Dietrich's own child had died of a rare viral infection. She understood that Renee's family needed an answer too. The family hoped that with Dietrich's help, they would finally discover the truth. The little girl had been buried, but to those who loved her, she had not been put to rest. In January 1994, 2-year-old Renee Good died mysteriously while on a custody visit with her father, Shane. The results of her autopsy were inconclusive. No cause of death was determined. The investigation stalled. Months later, Alvin, Texas police detective Sue Dietrich reopened the cold case. She met with Renee's grandmother, Sharon Couch, who told her the investigation into Renee's death had been disappointing.
And I don't really think that they thought that anything else was going to be done. But I just wanted to start from square one with them, and we did. And Sharon had done such a wonderful job of documenting everything.
Couch briefed the detective about Renee's good health and the undetermined cause of death. She also told her about a $50,000 insurance policy that Shane Good took out on his daughter months before her death.
You know, in a homicide investigation, most detectives know that you look at who has the most to gain by that person's death.
$50,000 could be a motive, but by itself, it did not prove homicide. Sharon Couch put Dietrich in touch with Dr. William Anderson, a pediatric forensic pathologist in Florida.
He wanted a copy of the autopsy report, and he reviewed that, called and said that he wanted tissue samples, slides of Renee, and that he would review that, and that he would call me back and let me know whether he thought that he could help.
The Harris County Medical Examiner's Office shipped the autopsy slides to Dr. Anderson in Florida. The slides contained samples of tissue from Renee's heart, lungs, and other vital organs. Dr. Anderson saw no signs of pneumonia or any other disease in the samples. At the time of her death, Renee was a healthy child. Because she was healthy, the the doctor was concerned with two abnormalities. The original autopsy showed an enlargement of the small veins of the lung tissue and some swelling in the brain.
That would indicate that the child didn't just suddenly die in an instant, like, for instance, a cardiac arrhythmia, something going wrong with the heart beating, that something actually occurred that took a little bit of time for this child to die. There's just a couple of things that are pretty...
He suspected Renee did not die of natural causes.
There's a great deal of dilatation in the vessels.
Dr. Anderson called prosecutor Jerry Yenny to say he needed more information to determine the cause of Renee's death. He suggested they exhume the body so he could perform a second autopsy.
And who is
Because Renee had been buried for 8 months, he advised the prosecutor to move quickly.
Dr. Anderson indicated to me that time was of the essence because there is decomposition in a dead body and that you lose the quality of tissues when you want to examine them.
Yenny acted immediately, but was careful to protect the evidence.
I was able to obtain a court order authorizing the removal of Renee Good's body from a cemetery. And we picked a particular weekend so that law enforcement was capable of being arranged so that security measures might be taken.
Yenny asked Detective Dietrich to arrange continuous custody for the body,
so that no one would be able to say that the body had been altered or tampered with in any way.
The body had to be treated as evidence from a potential crime scene. Any mishandling of it could make the results of a second autopsy inadmissible in court.
Everything was videotaped, and they put the casket in the ambulance. The ambulance was escorted back to Alvin by police escort. The body was taken to the hospital and stayed in a room that was guarded by police officers who stood guard by the door all night long. And then the next day, Dr. Anderson performed the autopsy.
The detective observed the 5-hour examination. It was a difficult task for Dietrich.
I think the thing that I remember the most about it was that she had pink ribbons in her hair. And she was very close in size to my child that had passed away. So, yeah, it was extremely difficult. But I knew that she was going to be able to tell us what happened to her.
The examination began with the doctor studying the outside of the body for bruises or abrasions. He found nothing remarkable. During an internal examination of the body, Dr. Anderson noted several things had not been done at the initial autopsy.
Number one, the spinal cord had not been removed and the back had not been looked at. The diaphragms, which separate the abdominal cavity from the thoracic cavity, the muscle themselves had not been removed. So basically, I conducted that portion of the autopsy.
Examining the soft tissue and muscle of the back and the area underneath the diaphragm, the doctor found signs of internal bleeding.
This was not just settling of blood. This clearly was blood in the soft tissues. And when that happens, we know there has to be circulation because something has to push the blood into the soft tissues. This indeed was hemorrhage, and it had occurred while the child was alive.
The location of the bleeding, near the belly, indicated force had been applied to that area.
The type of force could be inflicted, for instance, using two arms together in a scissor-like manner. Something that would interfere with that child's ability to breathe. That would fit with the findings of the congestion that we saw in the organs. So putting that together, I felt that this was consistent, very consistent, of a compressional asphyxia.
The doctor believed someone compressed Renee's abdomen until she suffocated. It was murder. Renee Good's body gave them the answers they needed. Now her family and the police were determined to find the person responsible. In Alvin, Texas, 2-year-old Renee Good died while visiting her father. Her family suspected foul play. 10 months later, her body was exhumed. A second autopsy revealed she had not died of natural causes. Detective Sue Dietrich called Renee's mother, Annette Campisi, to say the family had been right.
When Sue told us that she had been murdered, I thought, finally, this is it. It finally has happened. And it took us almost a year. It was about 10 months. I thought, I can't believe this day is finally here.
The new information gave prosecutor Jerry Yenny and her team something tangible to work with.
Yes.
The information from the second autopsy affected the investigation in probably a critical fashion because we had a homicide determination.
She was looking at a murder case. Shane Good was her prime suspect. The prosecutor assembled her team to decide how best to handle the investigation from this point.
Alone with this child. And then we're gonna have to work on motive.
Before arresting Good for the murder, they had to determine how to win a case based entirely on circumstantial evidence.
So anybody who has any other thoughts in addition to... We knew that there was a life insurance policy on Renee in the amount of $50,000, but during our investigation, Shane Good had not made an official claim for the proceeds of that life insurance policy, which I thought was unusual. I wanted Shane Good put at ease that this investigation was going to be closed, that it was over. So I wanted Sue Dietrich to go and tell him that she was closing the investigation, and could she please have an interview with him just to make sure she had covered all bases. And one of the things I had asked Sue to address with Shane Good was, who was the last person to see Renee Good alive? Because I realized as a prosecutor that the last person to see her alive was basically the person that killed her.
Right there's fine.
Dietrich said she had a few questions to tie up loose ends on the case.
We spoke briefly, and then I told him that I needed to get a statement from him. He said that his handwriting was not very good, and he asked me if I would write a statement for him. He would dictate it to me, and then he would read it, and then he would sign it if he agreed with everything in the statement, which is what occurred.
The prosecutor hoped Good would tell the detective something that could later be used against him in court.
Renee was fine.
I wanted her to lock him in, that he was the last person to see his daughter alive, and he very willingly did that. I also wanted Sue to cover with Shane Good that Renee was a healthy child, that when she came to him that evening, that she was healthy and that there was no reason for her death.
You'll also sign underneath.
When he was finished with his statement, Good read and signed the document, agreeing to its content. He still hadn't mentioned the life insurance, but as the detective was about to leave, Good asked a provocative question.
He asked me if the medical examiner's office was still conducting tests, and I told him no. He asked me when I thought he might be hearing from the insurance company, and I told him that I felt like he'd be hearing from someone pretty quickly.
Go over some evidence concerns.
Dietrich gave Shane's signed statement to Jerry Yenny. That, along with the insurance motive and Dr. Anderson's autopsy report, convinced the prosecutor she was ready to go to the grand jury.
From Florida?
Yes.
On December 7, 1994, Yenny presented the case to a Brazoria County grand jury. Shane Good's parents were called to testify. The grand jury proceeding got everyone's story on the record. Usually, a grand jury does not rule immediately. But this time, they issued an indictment that morning.
They want you to leave the courtroom with the indictment in your...
With the warrant, the detective went to arrest Shane Good. There was no answer at his home. Dietrich was worried he might have fled. But then the suspect and his father pulled up. Dietrich placed Good under arrest.
There was no reaction whatsoever. He didn't say, "What do you mean? I didn't kill anybody." Nothing. He just turned around and put his hands behind his back. So we cuffed him and took him to the Alvin jail.
No.
Because prosecutors believed he killed his daughter for financial gain, they charged Good with capital murder.
All right, I'll bring the pretrial motions.
Houston attorney Skip Cornelius was hired to defend Good against a particularly difficult charge.
Develop some theories.
The allegation is that there was an injury, in this case a murder, to a child. Human beings are so protective of children that that allegation all by itself, unsupported by any evidence, just the naked allegation, is almost impossible to overcome. It evokes such rage and resentment and bias and prejudice in the heart of human beings, just the thought that somebody could kill a child. Getting beyond that initial prejudice is the biggest hurdle that I faced in this case.
Ron,
the prosecution faced their own challenges.
And Gary, you're coordinating our witnesses.
Their case was entirely circumstantial. The state had no eyewitnesses and no murder weapon.
I'm missing on a timeline.
They decided not to seek the death penalty.
I believed that if I sought the death penalty, that I would actually put the jury in the position of acquitting him. I would make the stakes so high that it would backfire.
As the trial approached, the prosecutors hoped they would be able to secure a conviction against a man they believed killed his own daughter. In Alvin, Texas, Shane Good was on trial for the murder of his 2-year-old daughter, Renee. The trial began on August 7, 1995.
Your opening statement.
The Brazoria County prosecutor told the jury about the Goods' failed marriage, Shane's alleged lack of interest in Renee, and the $50,000 life insurance policy. She said that the state would prove Shane Good was the last person to see his daughter alive, and that he was a murderer.
Never ask about the child.
Defense attorney Skip Cornelius explained that there was no evidence to prove Good had done anything wrong. He reminded the jury the defendant was presumed innocent.
We are presenting our side.
The facts in this case were extremely weak. It's very difficult to prove you did not do something. My job was to highlight the non-existence of their evidence.
Truth shall help you? I do. Please be seated.
Prosecutor Jerry Yenny chose to begin her case by calling Senior Patrol Officer Terry Earl.
I was able to give the jury some sense of what the scene was like initially by someone who came right upon it and by an officer who had no downside. Every single defense question, he could look at him and say, "I'm simply here to tell you what I saw that day."
At the residence, I was met by the victim's grandfather. He told me that the child needed...
Officer Earl told the court that when he arrived, the emergency team was on the scene.
There was 2 paramedics.
But had been unable to get the father to release Renee to them.
And my observation was when I first got there, his weeping noises or attempt to cry weren't genuine.
The officer testified that it seemed to him that the defendant was pretending to be distraught. Good's lawyer contended the officer was not qualified to make that judgment.
I took offense at Terry Earl's testimony that he
concluded that the defendant's actions weren't genuine. That's his opinion. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. Neither is Terry Earl.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth.
The state called Renee's mother, Annette Campisi, to the stand. She testified that Shane was behind in child support and did not show interest in his daughter.
1993, Renee. It was 1 month before.
The prosecutor introduced into evidence a video taken at Christmas 1993, 1 month before Renee's death.
So be it, we'll label this item 1.
The defense had tried to have the tape disallowed, arguing it was prejudicial, but the judge allowed 4 minutes of it to be played. On the tape, the jury saw a happy, healthy child performing for the camera. It was a difficult moment for everyone. Hoping to establish that Shane Good hid important information from his ex-wife, the prosecutor played a taped telephone conversation between Annette and Shane that Annette made after Renee's death.
When we spoke.
Your Honor, I would like to enter this for the record and play it for the jury.
Okay, we'll label this item 2.
Yeah, I got something at work.
When Annette asked about insurance, Good denied having any significant coverage on Renee.
I'm not really sure.
Did you have any kind of life insurance or anything?
I got like from a thing at work, I think it's 2,000 or something like that.
Why did
The
you
prosecutor asked Annette why she made the recording.
Because I felt that there was something wrong with the circumstances of Renee's death.
It was difficult for the defense attorney to cross-examine the little girl's mother.
Your witness.
But he needed to point out that suspicion between divorced parents does not prove guilt.
She made her position clear to the jury that she thought Shane was guilty, but she had no evidence to back it up.
To give the jury a complete picture of the night in question, the state called others who were in the house that night, including Shane's niece, Sarah.
After Renee had died, what did you
After reviewing her pretrial statement, the prosecutor asked the girl what she thought happened to her cousin.
She looked at the jury and said, "I'm afraid that he might have actually killed her," meaning the defendant.
The defense attorney did not hear the comment and asked for it to be repeated.
And she said, I think he might have actually killed her." And that made the jury almost stand up in their chairs.
Good's lawyer established the girl did not see her uncle do anything unusual the night of Renee's death. He asserted the prosecution was merely pointing to people's feelings and impressions. To bring in more facts, the state next called forensic pathologist Dr. William Anderson. The details of his findings were the cornerstone of the state's case.
Dr. Anderson's testimony was very critical, telling the jury that with the additional procedure done on the second autopsy, that the cause of death for Renee Good was compressive asphyxiation, that it was not accidental, and that someone intentionally killed this child.
Using a life-size doll, the prosecutor asked the doctor to show the jury how he believed Renee was killed.
Applying pressure directly would cause bruising, damage to the spleen, increased.
Every eye in the courtroom was focused on Dr. Anderson.
One of the possible mechanisms we looked at, a scissor-type grip, and then a squeezing and a compressing, and holding that for a period of time, several minutes, which would then account for the compressional asphyxia, and would also then explain some of the findings I'd indicated had taken some time to actually transpire.
The doctor testified he had no doubt Renee's death was a homicide.
I would say yes, you have a homicide.
No further questions. Thank you.
To refute the expert witness's credibility, the defense pointed out that the state paid for the doctor's services.
Is that correct?
Yes.
I really did not think that a jury in Brazoria County would be very persuaded by that kind of testimony.
They hoped the jury would put more faith in the original autopsy report, which left Renee's cause of death undetermined. After the doctor, the state called a final witness.
I'm going to hand you what has been marked.
Detective Sue Dietrich took the stand. The prosecutor asked the detective to review her investigation.
She also testified to her taking a statement, and we introduced Shane Good's statement through her.
Write out a statement.
The detective told the court the defendant would not write out his own statement.
It's okay.
He asked her to do it. After going over the statement for the jury, the prosecutor passed the witness.
It is pivotal to your theory, is it?
Their theory was that everybody had to have been asleep, because part of our defense was, how could this have happened without people knowing it? Renee was asleep less than a foot from her sister, Michelle. How could somebody have killed her during the night without these girls waking up?
But since it is crucial to your theory...
Good's lawyer argued the dictated statement had been altered.
On the statement that was introduced into evidence is the phrase, everyone else was asleep.
The attorney pointed out the letters were squeezed in over the signature.
Is it possible that it happened anyway?
In his original police statement, Good said Renee's sister Michelle was awake when he went to bed.
The statement that was introduced into evidence out here on the margin has, I think Michelle was still not awake, and I got up and went to bed. The word not has been added in there. I mean, nobody even, that's not even intelligible to say Michelle was still not awake. It doesn't even make sense.
When was the final sentence?
By suggesting the statement had been altered, Good's lawyer had delivered a serious blow to the state's case. After the detective's testimony, the state rested and the jury left for a recess. Calling for a bench conference, the defense made a motion to dismiss the charges. Now was their best chance of gaining an acquittal. They hoped to convince the judge there was insufficient evidence to continue, to take the decision-making away from the jury in such an emotional case.
You never know what a jury's going to do. And the tendency where a child is the victim is somebody's got to pay.
If the judge agreed that not enough evidence had been presented by the state, he could dismiss the case, and Shane Good would walk out of the courtroom a free man. When the prosecution rested in the murder trial of Shane Good, the defense made a motion to dismiss the case due to insufficient evidence.
Do you wish to be heard?
I think we have met our
The judge
burden,
considered the argument, but denied the motion.
We'll deny it. Let's bring the jury back in.
The jury would decide if the defendant would go free. Defense attorney Skip Cornelius was undaunted.
I still thought we were going to win. I just had this enormous hurdle to get over because it was a child victim.
Good's lawyer began by calling his own expert, the former chief medical examiner of Dallas. He had reviewed the original autopsy report and analyzed the victim's tissue samples.
He agreed that a cause of death could not be determined. And he had done thousands of autopsies and said that there are some situations where you cannot tell the cause of death.
The prosecutor wanted to convince the jury that the medical examiner had not thoroughly looked into the death.
Police investigation.
She pointed out he hadn't studied birth records, pediatrician reports, and other items that might factor in Renee's health.
I've only examined the stuff.
She hoped the jury would disregard his testimony as uninformed.
No further questions.
The defense then called their most important witness, Renee's father, Shane Good.
I needed to have him on the witness stand, have the jury meet him and get his explanation for these things. And frankly, I thought he made a very good witness.
Is that correct?
Yes.
When asked about Renee's life insurance, Good explained he had purchased it to use as her savings. She could cash it in when she turned 18. He never told Annette about it because he did not trust her after the divorce.
Annette was obviously hostile to me, or she had hostile feelings towards me.
He said he hadn't seen Renee for the first year because he was awaiting the paternity test, then the finalization of court-ordered visitation rights.
Basically trying to keep me away from her and the child.
Referring to his dictated statement, Good denied saying that everyone was asleep when he went to bed. Good had countered each of the state's circumstantial claims.
How the marriage went? How did it go? What was it like?
But prosecutor Jerry Yenny noted the father's lack of emotion while he testified.
Get along real good.
She hoped the jury did too.
He could not muster any emotion. I believe that everybody on that jury, they expected, I think, to see somebody who was upset that their daughter was dead. They didn't see that.
In her cross, the prosecutor returned to the morning of January 23rd, 1994.
Get back, get back.
Good admitted he never asked the girls what happened to Renee or made any effort to resuscitate her. The state asserted this was because he already knew she was dead.
Where is she? What's going on?
The prosecutor also reviewed the statement Good gave Detective Sue Dietrich.
Something's wrong with Renee and ran downstairs.
In it, he claimed he was the last person to see Renee alive.
Now, how does he know that? How does anybody know that you're the last person to see somebody alive, really, under those circumstances? He also, I also said, so if it's a homicide, I looked at the defendant and asked him, if this is a homicide, you're the only one who could have done it, right? And he answered, yeah, if it's a homicide, sure am. I would have never expected that response.
After 6 days of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated 3 hours before reaching a decision.
Please rise. We, the jury, find the defendant, Michael Shane Good, guilty of capital murder as charged.
Good was sentenced to life in prison.
Shane Good never had 1 ounce of love for that child. She wasn't even a human being to him, and that bothers me. That bothers me. She was a liability. She was a financial liability.
Take the prisoner to
Skip
jail.
Cornelius believed his client had strong grounds for an appeal.
Frankly, I never thought, and don't think to this day, that they were sufficient legally to support a conviction. I still, at that point, had very high hopes for the appeal on the issue of insufficient evidence.
But 4.5 years after Renee's death, Good confessed in a letter to Annette. By his own hand, Renee's father had negated all hope of a successful appeal.
I was initially surprised at Shane Good's letter from the penitentiary because, in my mind, it was at a time when he was still pending appeal. So even if his case was reversed on appeal, we could use the letter.
For Renee's mother, Annette Campisi, the letter only confirmed what she already knew.
I just thought, finally, everybody has seen him for what he is. Everybody knows the truth now. Renee has her justice.
A young mother disappears in Arlington, Texas. Few clues are left behind. When investigators discover a connection between the missing woman and 2 unexplained deaths, they suspect a serial killer is at work. Police detectives and a tireless district attorney team up to find and prosecute a career criminal. In this episode, some names have been changed. A disturbing link between several suspicious deaths alarms Coryell County District Attorney Sandy Gately. She will have to use the slightest evidence to ensure no other victims fall prey to a serial killer.
When you have someone that killed a long time ago, you think he's killed again and maybe a third time. The pressure comes on to do something about it, to look at that case, to try to build the evidence, because you know if you don't get him off the street now, he's going to do it again.
Located between the urban centers of Dallas and Fort Worth, Arlington, Texas is a diverse suburb community with a strong economy and a low crime rate. On the night of October 11, 1994, outside a fast food restaurant, 26-year-old Emilita Reeves pulled up with her girlfriend, Mona Lisa Domingo. Emilita was dropping Mona Lisa off at work before going out for the evening. Emilita left an impoverished life in the Philippines to come to the United States as a mail-order bride. She was the mother of a 3-year-old boy, but was unhappy with the arranged marriage.
Oh my gosh, you have to go. I'll take you next week, I promise.
What about picking me up tonight after work? Can you just do that and then,
I don't know. I told Tony I'd meet him around 11:30.
Oh, at 11:30, yeah.
But call me anyway.
Well, thanks for
It was around 8 o'clock when she dropped Mona Lisa off before going to meet her friend, Tony. She drove away, alone. By the next morning, Mona Lisa was worried. She had paged Emilita and called her cell phone several times the night before. There was no reply. Mona Lisa and another friend checked Emilita's house, but she wasn't there.
I'm telling you, something's wrong.
The women knew it wasn't like Emilita not to answer calls.
She said she was going to go see Tony, and that's the
They believed something happened to her.
talk every day. I've tried this so many times that I know I've never had
They checked other friends' houses, but found no sign of the young mother. After not hearing from her friend for 24 hours, Mona Lisa filed a missing persons report with the Arlington Police Department.
Yes, how you doing? Our friend is
She explained what had happened, that Emilita had dropped her off on Tuesday, then seemed to disappear. None of their friends had heard from her, and her truck was gone.
What's your last name? Reeves. R-E-E-V-E-S. Okay.
Arlington police detective Buddy Evans learned the friends had an agreement to be in constant contact with each other for safety.
She just vanished. It was one of those deals where her friends were concerned about her welfare. Emilita had told them in the past if she ever came up missing, didn't answer her cell phone, they couldn't find her, couldn't locate her, that they should call the police.
That evening, Arlington police officers were dispatched to Emilita's home. There was no answer at the door, and the house looked empty. As they checked the area for Emilita's truck, the front door opened. The man identified himself as Jack Reeves. He was the husband of the young mail-order bride. The officers asked about Emilita, explaining that her friends had filed a missing persons report. Reeves said he saw her the night before. She went out to a club to meet someone. When asked why he hadn't reported her missing, he said it was common for him not to see her for days at a time.
Emilita's fine, trust me.
But she would always check in on her son, and she always returned.
And I really need to get him back inside. Okay, sir.
Without a warrant, the officers could not do anything more.
Okay, sure.
You have a good night. Yeah. Thanks.
They left to file their report. The next day, Emilita's friends located her truck and alerted police. Officers responded to a parking lot behind a store, 2 miles from Emilita's home, where the truck was parked. It was a store Emilita frequented, according to her friends. Several things about the vehicle were suspicious. Friends told police Emilita always locked the doors, left the steering wheel in the up position, and carried a child seat inside. But police noted the driver's door was unlocked, and the alarm was not set. The steering wheel was down,
Child safety seat's gone.
and the child seat was missing.
Please welcome. You received a return on this vehicle.
The driver's seat position also indicated someone other than Emilita left the truck there.
The seat was way far back. Emilita was very small in stature. You know, if it would have been a deal where she had driven the vehicle to the location, got out, and was abducted, the seat should have been pulled up closer where she could use it to actually drive the vehicle.
Police hoped someone in the area spotted whoever parked the truck. They talked to employees at the store where the truck was parked. They noticed the vehicle that morning, but no one saw anything unusual.
Anybody since then?
I haven't seen anybody at all.
And no one saw Emilita.
Have you worked every night?
Investigators searched the surrounding area for any sign of the missing woman, or anything that might indicate who had left the truck there. Despite their efforts, they found nothing relating to the case. That afternoon, Arlington police officers returned to Emilita's house to speak with the missing woman's husband. But Jack Reeves was not home.
Excuse me, miss. Hi, you know Jack Reeves who lives here?
A neighbor reported seeing Reeves drive away with his son earlier that morning.
He was pulling a trailer.
She said he was hauling a trailer, and it looked like he was going camping.
What's your name?
Ashley.
Troubled by the discovery of Emilita's truck, Detective Evans met with homicide detective Tom Lenore, a 14-year veteran of the Arlington Police Department.
Anytime there is a missing persons report where there is some evidence of foul play, it's the procedure at the Arlington Police Department to immediately notify the homicide division.
Learning about Emilita, Lenore agreed that foul play was probably involved in her disappearance.
The best way to describe Emilita is that she was a creature of habit. She became a creature of habit where if anyone called her, she would immediately call back, either by the telephone or the cellular phone. Through this habit, Emilita was virtually at anyone's beck and call at any time. She wouldn't answer her pager, and she wouldn't answer her cellular phone, and that was completely uncharacteristic of her.
The young woman could have left on her own, but she might have been kidnapped or killed. Arlington police entered Emilita's disappearance into the National Crime Information Center computer. The posting carried Emilita's photo, description, and facts of the case. If Emilita, or her body, showed up anywhere in the country, Arlington police would be notified. Emilita's friends also did what they could to find her. They organized to offer a reward for information on her whereabouts.
As a matter of fact, they were so concerned about her. I mean, they were even making flyers and putting them up around the area, you know, have you seen this person, so on and so forth. And so they were very helpful and very concerned about her welfare.
From interviews with friends, detectives Lenore and Evans learned Emilita was romantically involved with Mona Lisa, the last person known to have seen the missing woman. They needed to interview her.
You know, when someone is missing and you believe you have a homicide, we want to see what kind of motive. What is our motive? If there were any motive whatsoever, it has something to do with an emotional or romantic relationship with Emilita. That is the nucleus of our motive. We saw no other motive for Emilita to be missing or to have been murdered.
The detectives met with Mona Lisa Domingo. She said Emilita had come from a very poor family in the Philippines, hoping to raise her children in America. She had applied for a green card, but did not receive it yet. When pressed for details about their relationship, Mona Lisa admitted she was in love with Emilita. But she swore she hadn't seen her since being dropped off for work. Although she did not approve of Emilita's marriage, she said she would never harm her girlfriend.
Where Mona Lisa became the most important witness at this point in time was she was the last person to have seen Emilita alive. When Emilita took her to work at the restaurant where Mona Lisa was employed. She was also the individual who tried to call Emilita that evening and didn't get a response from her, and started the campaign on trying to find her. She was very honest. She was very upfront.
Her alibi checked out. Police felt it was unlikely Mona Lisa was involved in her friend's disappearance. She told them about Tony Rivera, the man Emilita was supposed to meet the night she vanished.
Tony was a potential suspect in this investigation, simply because of the relationship between him and Emilita.
Investigators talked to Tony's boss, who let them use his office to interview the young man. Tony told them he and Emilita often spent time together.
There was a platonic relationship that we knew of for sure, and we knew that Emilita definitely had a romantic crush on Tony. What makes Tony different than all of her other friends is he's a male, number one, and number two, because there is a potential romantic involvement in the two of them. And it's also a romantic involvement, if it occurred, that would be one that would obviously have conflicts, simply because Emilita is married. It has the ingredients for what we've seen in the past that certainly could have turned into a murder or a homicide, no doubt about it.
The detectives asked Tony about the night in question.
Then she was supposed to come to a club and meet me.
He said that night he and Emilita were supposed to meet at a club. Eventually, he called her cell phone and got no answer. He paged her repeatedly, but she never responded. After several hours, he gave up and went home. Detectives asked Tony to complete a timeline of his actions.
Like right away.
What did you do the next day?
The next day, I came to work around 9 a.m. I couldn't get in touch with her. I couldn't reach her. So I think that's about it.
Tony was fully cooperative, answering the officers' questions and agreeing to take a polygraph examination. But the investigators noted gaps in his timeline.
Not really a suspect at this time.
They needed to confirm his alibi. They interviewed Tony's coworkers, family members, and the friends he shared with Emilita, asking questions about the suspect's actions on the days surrounding Emilita's disappearance.
At least, what, 5 years maybe?
With each interview, more of Tony's story was corroborated.
Any evidence of violence?
They sent officers to the club Tony mentioned. People there said they hadn't seen Emilita in several days, but they confirmed Tony was there, alone, on the night in question.
You know, you have to maintain the integrity, you have to take all the possibilities, address them, and either confirm or exclude. And in this particular case, Tony was excluded. He was not excluded on his merit, he was not excluded on his word, he was excluded on fact.
Each of Emilita's friends had been cleared.
We wanted to make sure we covered all bases to eliminate anyone or anything that may have possibly been related to her disappearance.
The one potential suspect not cleared by police was the young woman's husband. They had to track down Jack Reeves and hope he could finally give them some answers. In Arlington, Texas, Emilita Reeves disappeared without a trace. 2 days later, police located her vehicle. There was evidence it had been driven by someone else. Detectives questioned several suspects, but eliminated them. They learned her husband, Jack, had left town. Looking for more information about Jack Reeves, investigators questioned even more of Emilita's friends. The friends confirmed that the marriage was troubled, according to Detective Buddy Evans.
We learned that Emilita was extremely unhappy in the relationship, and in fact wanted to get out of the relationship.
One friend said that on the day Emilita disappeared, she came to lunch with her son. Emilita told her friend she wanted to leave Jack because he was abusive.
I'm taking my son with me.
But she had not received her green card yet and was afraid of being deported if she got a divorce.
Out of control.
Then she might lose her son.
He doesn't mind about Mona Lisa. He's just really jealous because he thinks I'm seeing another man, but I'm not.
The young mother feared her husband was going to kill her and bury her in the woods, according to Detective Tom Lenore.
Emilita told several stories about her relationship with Jack that alarmed her friends, but when she would camp with Jack, she would describe how he would, just out of the blue, dig a large hole and not give any explanation for that hole whatsoever. And she had no understanding as why he would do that, but she was afraid of him. She was inherently afraid of Jack.
But she did not know what she could do.
In the woods by the lake.
According to her friends, Emilita had fled the Philippines because political unrest had made it dangerous, and she could not make a living there. She did not want to go back. Her friends told police Emilita warned them to look into Jack if she disappeared, or if she did not return a page immediately. The friend said Emilita hated going with Jack during his frequent camping trips to Lake Whitney, afraid he would kill her there.
All the ladies gave us information of why they believed that Jack was responsible for her disappearance, and that if anybody knew where she was, he would know where she was.
It was time for the Arlington police to talk to Emilita's husband, Jack Reeves. When he returned to Arlington, detectives asked Reeves to come in for an interview. They asked him why he did not report his wife missing. He claimed she had disappeared before, so he wasn't worried. She always came back.
What about the night you last saw her?
Reeves described the night he last saw Emilita.
Getting ready to go out?
He said that shortly after he came home, she got dressed up, then left him with their son.
Where are you going?
Just out with a friend.
He mentioned she took her cell phone with her. She did not say where she was going. He said that was the last time he saw his wife. Reeves refused to take a polygraph test, saying he was a naturally nervous person and could not trust the machine.
Let you have a copy.
But he agreed to sign a statement. During the interview, Reeves said something that struck the detectives as odd.
He made the off-the-wall comment, "If you find Emilita's body at Lake Whitney, are y'all going to blame me?" And that was extremely interesting because we weren't even at the level of Emilita's death yet. No one said anything about her dying, and no one certainly mentioned anything about Lake Whitney.
To further confirm their suspicions, detectives decided to set a trap for Reeves.
Really?
In this particular case, we had to take a chance. And so we used a series of bluffs with Jack.
Someone was dragged along.
They told Reeves they wanted to test his carpet for DNA.
While skin cells can
Bluffing, they said traces of DNA from a dragged dead body could be found, no matter how well the carpet was cleaned.
Although they're inadmissible in court, they mean absolutely nothing as far as evidence. It's almost like a polygraph examination. A polygraph examination has no evidentiary value whatsoever, But it tells me, hey, is someone telling the truth, someone lying?
You know, we can find samples.
Reeves then appeared worried.
You know,
He said he had been planning to replace his carpet.
a new carpet.
Okay, well,
The detectives asked him to hold off on the work for at least a week.
just in case we want a forensics labs to be able to test some of that.
He agreed.
Okay. You're free to do so. Okay.
The trap was set.
We appreciate it.
Now police waited to see what Reeves would do.
Talk to you.
We set a surveillance team up on Jack's house because I wanted to see how he would react, what he would do.
Here he comes.
The very next day, Reeves hired workers to take out the carpet.
I recall early the next morning I got a phone call from one of the people on the surveillance team, and they said that Jack had some people out there and was removing all of the carpet out of his house. And once again, although that is not solid evidence that someone committed murder, it tells me that we're on the right track with this man. Listen, an innocent man, from my experience, is not going to rip out his carpet if he has nothing to hide.
Detectives questioned one of the workmen. He said Reeves instructed him to dispose of the carpet and paid him extra to do it immediately. Because of Reeves' comment about Emilita's body and Lake Whitney, investigators searched the area.
We checked with cadaver dogs, looking for fresh burial areas in this park, so on and so forth. We did aerial searches in aircraft over the area looking, and did foot searches. And of course, you're talking about a tremendous amount of area to look.
The terrain was heavily wooded and hard to search. After checking areas where Jack normally camped, investigators still had nothing. There was no sign of Emilita, and no physical evidence of foul play. Hoping for more leads, detectives looked into the suspect's past. They discovered Reeves had been married twice before. He married his second wife, Myung Reeves, while stationed with the Army in Korea. Myung died while the couple was on a camping trip at Lake Whitney 8 years earlier. In 1986, park rangers responded to Jack Reeves' call that his wife Myung had drowned. At the time, Reeves told the rangers he left her alone for half an hour. When he returned, his wife had drowned in 3 feet of water.
When we talked with the police who investigated the death, they recall injuries to Myung. They recall bruises to her and injuries to her face.
But a justice of the peace issued a certificate stating the death was accidental, closing the case. Curious about what seemed a strange ruling, investigators tracked down Myung's sister.
I thought what was extremely revealing was when I talked with Myung's sister, the first words out of her mouth is that, you know, my sister was murdered.
Okay.
She recalled seeing Myung at the funeral home and seeing bruises to her neck and her face. She pointed that out to Jack. Interesting, the next day, Jack has the body cremated, while the sister is bringing up all of these questions.
The sister said Myung was planning to divorce Jack just before she died. Because of the mysterious fates of 2 of Jack Reeves' wives, investigators now looked into the death of his first wife, Sharon, which occurred 16 years earlier.
Our investigation also led us to the 1978 death of Sharon Reeves, which was reportedly a suicide. And we were really interested in this particular death simply because it involved a self-inflicted shotgun wound to her chest.
Detectives searched records and phoned Sharon's father.
Hello?
So I asked him, when was the last time you spoke with Jack Reeves? Are you seeing Jack? And his comments were, the last time I spoke with Jack and saw him was after he murdered my daughter.
Yes.
Sharon's father said that Jack was serving another tour of duty in Korea in 1978 when Sharon wrote to him that she wanted a divorce. Jack immediately took leave and returned to Texas. Days later, Sharon was dead.
Which tied in with the other wives in each of those cases. They were going to leave Jack. And so you start to put these things together and you start to think, well, maybe nobody leaves Jack voluntarily or through divorce.
Since Sharon Reeves died in her home in the city of Copperas Cove, the jurisdiction over the case rested 170 miles south of Arlington in Coryell County, Texas. The Arlington detectives met with Copperas Cove Police and the Coryell County District Attorney to see if the cold case warranted prosecution.
Responded to the scene.
The retired officers who investigated Sharon's death told them what they knew.
And let us inside.
16 years earlier, they responded to a call of a suicide.
Suicide. She's in the bedroom back here. Where is
Jack Reeves led them into a bedroom where the body of his wife, Sharon Reeves, lay, covered in blood.
1111 dispatch.
As police checked for a pulse, nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. After the suspicious disappearance of Jack Reeves' third wife, Emilita, police looked into the death of his first wife, Sharon. Investigators revisited the 16-year-old case.
16 years ago, we got a call about a suicide. Responded to the scene.
One of the first officers on the scene, John Morrison, related the story to detectives Buddy Evans and Tom Lenore.
He was the eyes for Buddy and I. We actually relived that crime scene. We didn't need crime scene photographs because we had Johnny. And I thought he gave a very vivid, believable account.
Morrison said that on July 20th, 1978, he and his partner responded to a suicide call. Jack Reeves led them to a bedroom. He said he had been in the kitchen when he heard a gunshot. Then he found his wife, dead. The police approached Sharon Reeves, who lay on the bed with a shotgun wound to the chest. She was still alive.
Get EMS over here. Central,
They
I need
called
EMS
for an
to this
ambulance.
location right away.
But within seconds, Sharon Reeves breathed her last breath.
Stand right over here, please.
Yes, sir.
Efforts to resuscitate the 34-year-old woman failed. A coroner came to check the body. The Texas authorities believed the military man's story. Cause of death was listed as a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Suicide by shotgun. Investigators photographed the position of the body and gun.
It's for protection.
Reeves showed police several handguns he kept in the house. The officer wondered why Sharon used the long and heavy shotgun. Reeves claimed Sharon wrote a suicide note. It said she had fallen in love with another man and could not decide between them, so she was ending her life. It had been 16 years since Sharon's death, and nearly all of the evidence had been destroyed. Coryell County District Attorney Sandy Gately had only one piece of evidence, a single photograph of the scene.
The crime scene photo that we had in this case, the only photo available, showed Sharon Reeves basically laying on the bed with her legs dangling off the bed. She was completely undressed. Her arms were out to her sides and slightly up, and the shotgun was leaning against her left knee. There was considerable blood spatter, and it was easy to see the direction of flow of the blood across her entire body.
They needed an expert to evaluate the photograph. Gately contacted Tom Bevel, a world-recognized expert in blood spatter analysis and crime scene reconstruction.
There were some issues here that seemed to be inconsistent with what I've seen in times past. I've not, to this date, actually worked a female suicide where the female was completely nude. Another issue was that her hair was still moist, as if she's through with her bathing for the day. I've not ever worked a suicide where somebody has cleaned themselves up, such as a shower or a bath, and then come out and immediately done a suicide. You, as a rule, do not find as many females that commit suicide with a firearm.
The 1978 report theorized Sharon sat on the bed and pulled the trigger with her toe. Checking the photo, Bevel noted the blood first ran down the length of the leg, indicating she was standing, then turned and ran sideways after she fell back. Bevel also questioned the placement of the gun.
Since it's definitely my opinion that she would have had to have been standing, the gun is going to be going in the opposite direction because there's no shoulder back there to help stop it from the recoil. Even if she holds on to the barrel long enough before she's losing consciousness and falling backwards, it still would not be drawn to the position with which we find it. It's virtually impossible for the gun to end up in the position that it does. Based upon my analysis of the photograph, my opinion is that the shotgun was triggered by some other person other than her, and that it would have been while she's in an upright position and whoever the shooter is also in an upright position.
With forensic evidence suggesting a homicide, prosecutors obtained permission to exhume Sharon's body, 16 years after she was buried. They hoped an autopsy would provide further evidence. After studying the entrance wound, the medical examiner calculated the angle of the fatal gunshot. He concluded it was highly unlikely the wound could have been self-inflicted, agreeing that Sharon most likely was murdered. Evidence was piling up that Jack Reeves was responsible for the deaths of 3 wives. Now authorities had to make a decision on which case to prosecute. Emilita's body had not been found. Myong's body was cremated after her suspicious drowning. Their best chance of a conviction was for the murder of Jack's first wife, Sharon, in Coryell County.
We traveled to Arlington that morning, I believe it was March the 23rd of 1995, and they were going to execute the warrants at his house. Arlington, in the meantime, had him tailed. They were keeping an eye out for him to make sure they knew where he was. They followed him to the post office that morning when they got the word to go ahead and arrest him.
When he got out of his truck to mail a letter, the police moved in.
Get Reeves, freeze! Get the wall, turn around! Get the wall!
Police confiscated the envelope Reeves was about to mail. Obtaining a warrant, they checked its contents.
Interesting enough, he was going to mail a letter to a new mail-order bride. I thought that was rather intriguing, that and somewhat fitting that he was arrested for murder while trying to bring back another woman to the States.
They charged Jack Reeves with Sharon's murder, taking him off the streets before he could harm another woman. A search of his house produced no evidence relating to Sharon's death. His incarceration did not last long. A judge set bail at $300,000. Reeves made bail, and police had to release him to await trial. Days before the Sharon Reeves murder trial, there was a startling turn of events. A hunter walking through the woods at Jack Reeves' favorite camping site, Lake Whitney, made a grisly discovery. It would change the prosecution's plans and finally provide answers about a long-running mystery. In 1994, Emilita Reeves disappeared. Police suspected her husband, Jack Reeves, but had no evidence. Then, days before Reeves went to trial for the 1978 murder of his first wife, Sharon, an important discovery was made in the woods where he often camped. A year after Emilita vanished, a hunter found a skull and scattered bones near Lake Whitney, a place Emilita said she feared. Aware of the Reeves case, Texas Rangers reported the find to Arlington Police Detective Tom Lenore.
They had the anthropologist out there, and the preliminary findings was this was a young Asian woman. And I knew, I mean, very bold, but I knew it was Emilita. Yeah, there was no doubt about it. That was Emilita.
Exposure to the elements and foraging animals reduced the body to a skeleton. Police needed to confirm the identity. A forensic odontologist made x-rays of the skull's teeth and compared them to dental records of Emilita Reeves. They were an exact match. Now prosecutors could charge Reeves with his third wife's murder. The discovery of Emilita's body changed the state's plan in their case against Reeves. A special hearing was requested by Coryell County District Attorney Sandy Gately, who was working the Sharon Reeves murder.
We made an attempt to try to see if our judge would allow Emilita Reeves' case to be tried first in Bosque County. They had a more recent case, a lot more evidence to prove it. If we were able to do that, then when we tried our case, we could introduce evidence of the conviction in the Emilita case to show the pattern, as opposed to having to go back and completely prove the Emilita case in our case. And that's what we had hoped we would be able to do.
With the trial of Sharon Reeves now,
Defense attorney Wes Ball protested the change.
We felt the better strategy was to try to force the Coryell County case to trial first, because we felt we were in the best position based on the evidence in that case. And so that's what we did. We opposed the continuance.
What I know about this trial, we're going to move forward and try this trial first. That's my ruling.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The defense prevailed, and Gately had no choice but to move forward with the Sharon Reeves murder case in Coryell County. The trial began on January 22, 1996, in the 100-year-old Gatesville, Texas courtroom.
This court's now in session.
Both sides gave opening statements. The district attorney told the jury she believed Jack Reeves shot his wife Sharon after arguing over a divorce. She claimed they would prove that the idea of Sharon killing herself with a shotgun was preposterous.
Had been married and divorced.
In his opening, the defense attorney contended that Sharon could not decide between her husband and another man. As a result, she committed suicide.
Coryell County on an emergency leave to try to save his marriage.
Beginning its case, the prosecution called John Morrison, the first responding officer to the scene 17 years earlier. The retired officer related how he found Sharon lying on the bed. When asked his opinion, he said he was not comfortable with the death being called a suicide. The defense immediately objected, claiming the officer's opinion was not fact. The judge sustained the objection, instructing the jury to disregard the officer's statement. The state passed the witness. Under cross-examination, the officer admitted his testimony was based only on memory. All of the Copperas Cove police reports were destroyed, with most of the evidence years earlier.
Well, have you gone back or attempted to find out whether such reports that you may have made exist?
Yes, sir.
And have you learned that they no longer exist?
Yes, sir.
No further questions, Your Honor.
The defense believed the original ruling at the time of Sharon's death was more accurate than witnesses' recollections.
The pathologist at the local Army hospital made an external examination of the body. It was the opinion that this was a suicide, and that was the ruling. And we were trying to suggest to the jury that they shouldn't question a ruling by people that there's been no information presented or incompetent to make these opinions and conclusions.
The state called the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Sharon's exhumed body.
I would say that the trajectory would be, gentlemen, something along
The witness testified that Sharon was 5 feet tall and had a reach of less than 20 inches.
Let's say we have
The bullet trajectory indicated the gun had been pointing down and slightly from the left.
approximately here, so that the
He believed the
trajectory
length and
or
weight of the gun and the angle of the wound made it highly unlikely that Sharon could have fired the fatal shot herself, suggesting a homicide. Under defense cross-examination, the medical examiner admitted that his official conclusion in the autopsy report was the category undetermined for Sharon's cause of death.
Yes, sir, that's correct. No further questions, Your Honor.
I got him to acknowledge that suicide could not be ruled out. I think of the long and short of it was he thought homicide was more probable than suicide, but that suicide certainly could not be ruled out.
The prosecution's case had taken several damaging blows. Next, they called blood spatter expert Tom Bevel to the stand. He testified about his examination of the one surviving photograph of the scene.
That she was in a standing position at the time that she was shot. After receiving the shot, she fell over backwards onto the bed. It is my opinion that it is highly improbable that she is the person that actually triggered the firing mechanism. This is a close-up photograph of the thigh area, and what we have are 3 different blood runs that are going from the waist area toward the knee, as you would normally be in a standing position, which is what you would expect the blood to do if you're in a standing position and it hits that part of the thigh. But once the orientation has changed, consistent with that change in the orientation, the blood is going in the direction of the gravity flow, which at this point, once it has changed and formed kind of this L, she's laying on her back in a supine position against the bed. That actually activated the firing.
The state used Bevel's testimony to show the position of Sharon's body when the fatal shot was fired.
His testimony was very important because it was able to establish that Sharon was standing when the shotgun was pulled.
Or things such as most probable.
Questioned by Reeves' attorney, Bevel testified he usually worked with more than one black and white photograph of a crime scene.
Used in the practice of crime scene reconstruction.
So when you say most
He believed it was a homicide, but admitted that he could not completely exclude other possibilities, including suicide.
That's correct. The ultimate question, obviously, with that, couldn't my opinion possibly have been changed, or couldn't my opinion have been more firm if I had the additional opportunity to look at other angles of this scene? And I have to agree, yes, it is always better to have too many photographs from too many different angles as opposed to one single photograph from one angle and it being black and white.
To further explain the deadly gunshot, the state called Arlington police detective Buddy Evans. He had helped the prosecution stage a recreation of Sharon's alleged suicide.
I'm going to demonstrate to you now, or actually a model of.
To show the recreation to the jury, they used a model who was the same size as Sharon Reeves.
Her stature, actually pull the trigger of this weapon.
The position of the fatal wound was marked on the model's chest. Evans explained that with the recreation, they could show that it was impossible for Sharon to have fired the gun herself. The detective positioned the model and the gun. Standing and holding the gun herself, she could not reach the trigger. Although the blood spatter analysis indicated Sharon was standing when she was shot, they had the model sit. Again, holding the gun up, the model could not pull the trigger. They then had her try it with the butt of the gun resting on the floor. Forgetting the direction of the entrance wound, she angled the gun incorrectly.
The model is there in the loudest quiet sound I've ever heard in a courtroom, because you can hear a pin drop and then suddenly click, click. And I think the prosecution was stunned.
The state worried that reasonable doubt had just entered the jurors' minds.
It was bad. When we heard the click of that trigger being pulled, I mean, I was sweating. I turned around and looked at my investigator. He looked at me, and we're like, you know, we just lost this case.
Jack Reeves was on trial for the murder of his first wife, Sharon. In an attempt to show the jury that Sharon Reeves could not have shot herself, the state used a model to demonstrate. But the model was able to reach the trigger. Prosecutor Sandy Gately determined the trigger pulled because the model positioned the gun in a manner inconsistent with the actual gunshot wound.
Once we realized that it was just a miscalculation, we went back and showed the jury and explained to them, this is the mistake we made. This is why the trigger was able to be pulled, and this is what happens if you use the correct angles. Then it was like night and day. That was the big turning point in the whole trial.
After closing arguments, the case went to the jury.
Yes, we have, Your Honor.
It was up to them to decide if Jack Reeves murdered Sharon or if she had taken her own life. 12 of Reeves' peers agreed on what happened 17 years earlier.
Defendant rise, please.
He raised a 20-gauge shotgun to his wife's chest and pulled the trigger. Jack Reeves was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison.
Always is in a case like that where you know someone's taken somebody else's life and you can take that person off the street. You know you're going to get some decent time out of it. That's not even the most important part. The most important part is he's going to finally have to answer for something that he thought he'd covered up 17 years ago, and he's never going to be able to do it again.
But detectives Buddy Evans and Tom Lenore were not finished with Jack Reeves. They still wanted him prosecuted for the murder of his third wife, Emilita, whose remains were recovered a year after she disappeared. With a warrant, investigators had searched the house where Jack and Emilita lived.
There were some particular articles of jewelry that we were told if they were in that house that Emilita's gone, she's dead, because she never would have left without them. So if I were to believe that Emilita walked out of that house and left, she walked out of that house with absolutely nothing that she owned. And I thought it was even more intriguing is she walked out of that house and left her child. And she's not going to do that.
Another key piece of evidence developed after detectives received a call from Reeves' family. They said Reeves called them from jail, requesting they go to the house and get Emilita's cell phone out of a leather jacket he left behind. He told them not to tell police. At Reeves' second murder trial, Bosque County prosecutors presented evidence to support their theory of what had happened to Emilita. They believed she had mentioned leaving him because of his abuse. He became enraged, struck her, then strangled her. Evidence found in the garage indicated what happened next.
At the time of Emilita's disappearance, Jack Reeves took a perfectly good sofa, gutted it, got rid of it. We don't know where it went. The sofa's gone and Emilita's gone at the same time, and our theory at that point in time was she was transported in that sofa.
The 6-day Bosque County trial featured 70 witnesses and 227 pieces of evidence. Jack Reeves was found guilty of Emilita's murder on August 19, 1996. He was given the harshest possible sentence, 99 years, to run concurrently with his sentence for Sharon's murder. To date, all of his appeals have been denied.